so going back to IR35, it's in place. Organisations have had that initial adaptation period to try and get used to it and try and bring themselves up to compliance. But it's important that companies keep an eye on it and keep it in mind. How can they do that? What's the importance of that, and how do you think companies can do that?
Yeah, so I think it's for each company to design the most appropriate approach for them. So I don't believe one size fits all in terms of adapting to new legislations. Of course, the legislation is very clear, but depending on your organisation and how risk averse you are will depend on your approach to adopting it. For us, we were extremely keen to make sure that the implementation of IR35 didn't cut off certain talent channels. We know that contingent labour is a vital part of our operating model, so we were keen to make sure that we continued to engage where we possibly could. One of the approaches that we took that was perhaps slightly risky at the time was that we engaged directly with the contingent labourers, the limited company contractors, about IR35. And we were aware that this was frightening a couple of them. You know, some of them had been operating as limited companies for a long period of time. They were unsure about what the implications would be for them. So we didn't want to teach them to suck eggs, but we invited all of our contingent workers to a session, you know, the days where you used to host really big meetings in an office.
I remember them well.
So we hosted a session for all of our contingent workers, and we talked to them about how we planned to implement IR35 and that we would be taking a reasonable care on a case-by-case basis approach. So we wouldn't be implementing any blanket approaches for roles, that we would be looking at things on an individual basis. And we reiterated the importance of us taking that approach. And we weren't sure how that would land. We weren't sure whether we would get any sticky questions from our contractors about whether we'd be looking to increase their pay or change their way of working. I'm pleased to say it was actually quite well received from our contingent workers. So we offered them as much support as we possibly could. We pointed them in the directions of different accountancy advisory services if they needed them, but we just were open and honest about the approach that we were taking, how long it would take, when they might receive their SDS, what to think about if the SDS came back and they hadn't necessarily expected the output. So we engaged with them regularly, and we still do. So it's our contractor community of interest forum. We don't talk to them quite as often as we used to, but it was a two-way engagement by way of us being super transparent with our contractors about our approach. And clients, we all have to take reasonable care to constantly review whether the SDSs that we have in place are accurate. So it would be foolish to think that we can get away with doing it once or even twice a year. We need to do it on a really regular basis, and each time there's a new engagement or a new extension, that process is needed. So we've retained the communication channels, if you will, that we set up when we were initially implementing IR35 across the co-op. So rather than us meeting once a month with our executive team, we maybe only meet them twice yearly, but we will talk to them about changes in the market, any big cases that have been going through court and what we've learnt from them. We regularly engage with our partners, Brooks and Legal, who have supported us through the IR35 process, and they give us huge amounts of information and things that we should be thinking about. And we're also holding, just next week actually, some seminars and upskill sessions for our procurement teams. We did it initially, but we're doing it again, just to make sure that IR35 and different mechanisms of contracting are considered when procurement are getting involved in designing contracts. And like any legislation, some of it's a little bit vague, and we need to do our very best to interpret that in the most effective way, and utilising our partners to do that. So I think it's hugely important to make sure that people are aware that this is an ongoing obligation that clients have, but I equally think it's important that contractors are aware that it's their ongoing obligation to operate in line with the SDS that they have been given, and that they shouldn't equally slip back into habits that they've maybe had before, because as you rightly know, and many of your other podcasters have talked about, everything has to happen in practice as well as in the contract. So informing the contractors of that has equally been important. So it's certainly not going anywhere, and we need to keep it at forefront of mind.